At the family Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law tapped her fork on her glass and announced she was expecting my husband's baby. Everyone was shocked. I simply laughed and said, "Okay, my love." "I expected it," I added as I slid a DNA test across the table. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment on which city you're watching from. That way I can see how far my story has come." I had been preparing Christmas dinner the same way for 35 years, the turkey always in the oven at 4 p.m., potatoes au gratin from my mother's recipe, and the pumpkin pie my husband liked with extra cinnamon. That December 24th was no different. I got up early, laid out the red tablecloths we used every year, and arranged candles in the center of the table. Everything had to be perfect. At 6 p.m., everyone started arriving. First, my son Ethan with his wife, Giselle. She wore an emerald green dress, too tight for a family dinner, but I never said anything. I never said anything about Giselle. Then my two sisters arrived with their husbands, my brother-in-law Robert with his new girlfriend, and finally my mother-in-law, Margaret, who at 87 still arrived with that judge-like look she'd had since the day I entered this family. My husband, David, was in the living room serving whiskey to the men as he always did. I saw him laugh at something Robert said and, for a second, I wondered if I had ever been happy in this marriage, but I tucked that thought away where I kept all the others. Somewhere deep down where they wouldn't get in the way, dinner passed normally. Margaret criticized that the turkey was a little dry, though everyone else said it was delicious. My sister Claire asked if I had considered dyeing my hair because the gray made me look older. Giselle barely touched her food. She said her stomach wasn't feeling well. Ethan looked at her, worried. He asked her 3 times if she wanted to go home. She smiled and said she was fine, she just needed a moment. When I served dessert, Giselle stood. She picked up her wineglass, though I'd noticed she hadn't had a sip all evening, and gently tapped it with her fork. The clink cut through the conversation. "I have an announcement to make," she said. Her voice trembled a little, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't decipher at the time. "I know this will shock everyone, but I need to be honest. I need everyone to know the truth." The dining room fell silent. I saw Ethan frown in confusion. David put his fork down, watching Giselle with a strange expression. "I'm pregnant," Giselle said. A murmur ran around the table. My sister Susan giggled nervously, thinking it was good news, but Giselle wasn't finished, and the father is David. Time stood still. Margaret dropped her glass. Red wine spilled onto the snow-white tablecloth. Claire raised her hand to her mouth. Robert mumbled under his breath. Ethan sat frozen, eyes wide, staring at his wife as if she were a stranger. David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face went from white to red in seconds. Everyone looked at me. They expected me to scream, to cry, to break down, the spectacle of a betrayed wife. But I'd had 6 months to process this. 6 months since I found the first message on David's phone. 6 months since I confirmed what my heart already knew. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it by my plate. Then I stood, calm in a way I barely recognized. I walked to the kitchen, every eye on me, and returned with a manila envelope I'd hidden in the silverware drawer that morning. I slid it across the table to Giselle. "Okay, my love," I said, my voice almost amused, as if we were discussing the weather. Giselle looked at the envelope, then at me, the color draining from her face. "What is that?" David asked, finally finding his voice. "Open it," I told Giselle. "Please share what it says with everyone." She took the envelope with trembling hands. When she saw the papers, her fingers weakened and the documents fell onto the table. "It's a DNA test," I said, looking at each face around the table. "I did it 3 weeks ago when I learned Giselle was pregnant." I have a friend who works in the hospital lab. I got a hair sample from David and a saliva sample from Giselle. All very legal, all very official. Margaret stood from her chair. What does it say, Sylvia? Giselle had started to cry. Ethan stared at the papers as if they were a death sentence. The results came back 2 days ago, I continued. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. The baby Giselle is carrying has a 99.9% chance of being David's. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. No one moved, no one breathed. Time froze in that dining room, amid the remains of Christmas dinner and the shattered pieces of what once had been my family. And I, after 35 years of being the perfect wife and hostess, stood in front of them all, waiting for someone to say anything. No one did. That silence confirmed everything. It was in June when I found the first message. David had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. I'd never been the kind of wife who checked phones. In 35 years of marriage, I'd never felt the need. I trusted him, or at least I thought I did. But when the screen lit with a notification, something inside me made me look. I miss you. Last night was amazing. The name on the screen was simply G. He didn't even have the decency to save the contact with a full name. My stomach tightened. My hands shook. I picked up the phone and swiped. No password. David always said passwords were for people with something to hide. How ironic. I opened the messages. There were entries, photos, conversations that made my stomach turn, plans to meet, words he'd never said to me. Then I saw a photo, part of an arm with a tattoo I recognized immediately, a small hummingbird on the wrist, the same tattoo my daughter-in-law Giselle had. My knees buckled. I had to hold the counter to keep from falling. I heard the shower stop. I put the phone back and left the kitchen. In the guest bathroom, I threw up, then washed my face and looked in the mirror. I was 62, wrinkles around my eyes, gray hair I no longer bothered to dye, a few extra pounds. Was that the reason? Was I not enough for him anymore? But then I thought of Ethan. My only son, the one I carried, raised, and who always called me for advice. How could I tell him that his father and his wife were betraying him in the worst way? That night, David acted as always. We ate dinner, watched TV, then he went to sleep. I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., feeling everything I thought I knew crumble. In the days that followed, I began to really observe. The times David said he had to work late, the times Giselle canceled plans with Ethan, saying she was meeting friends, the glances at family dinners I'd mistaken for politeness, the excuses to be alone together. It had always been there. I'd been too blind, or too trusting, to see it. A week later, Giselle came by alone. She said Ethan was on a business trip and she wanted to visit me. I prepared myself. In the living room she chatted about the weather and a new restaurant, and I watched her, the way her eyes scanned the house as if it already belonged to her, the way she touched the necklace David gave me for our 30th anniversary, the one I'd stopped wearing because it seemed ostentatious. That necklace would look beautiful on you, I told her. She smiled, fingers on the pendant. Do you think so? David has very good taste. She used his first name with a familiarity that cut me like a knife. That was the moment I decided. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. I would outsmart them. I hired a private investigator. It cost me $1,200, money I withdrew from savings David didn't know I had. Within 2 weeks, the investigator brought photos. David and Giselle entering a hotel, Giselle leaving David's downtown apartment, the one he told me he sold 3 years earlier. More messages. More evidence. In August, during a family dinner, I noticed something different about Giselle. She didn't drink, skipped sushi, excused herself twice to the bathroom, and David looked at her with something possessive in his eyes. 3 days later, I followed Giselle to a clinic. I waited in my car, heart pounding. When she came out an hour later with a small white bag and a familiar expression, the same one I'd had 33 years ago when I learned I was pregnant with Ethan, everything fell into place. Giselle was pregnant with David's child, or so I thought, and they were probably planning to make it all explode so they'd be the victims. Maybe David would blame me for being a cold wife, maybe they'd claim they accidentally fell in love. A tragic romance with me as the obstacle. I had other ideas. I called my friend Karen at the hospital lab. At first she hesitated, but when she saw the investigators' photos and the pain in my eyes, she agreed to help. Getting samples was easier than I expected: David's hair from his brush, Giselle's saliva from a glass during one of her innocent visits. Karen processed everything discreetly, leaving no official trace. When the results came back in November, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and read them 3 times. 99.9% match. The baby was David's. No doubt, that night, I made dinner as usual. David arrived late, smelling of the expensive perfume Giselle wore. He kissed my cheek and asked what was for dinner. I smiled and served his favorite dish. Every hug that month was calculated, every I love you a necessary lie. Every family dinner where I pretended not to see their glances was an act. I was waiting for the perfect moment. Christmas, I kept the envelope with the DNA results in the cutlery drawer, planning for the day everyone would see the truth. That day had arrived. David was first to speak. He stood so quickly his chair crashed to the floor. "This is ridiculous," he said, voice shaking. "Sylvia, what kind of sick game is this? Where did you get that? It can't be real. Do you want me to call Karen at the lab?" I said, hands on the chair back. "She can confirm everything, dates, sample numbers." Giselle was still crying, but it looked wrong, not the shame of a discovered lover, but the panic of a plan falling apart. "Mom," Ethan said, voice broken. He stood, arms limp at his sides. "Mom, tell me this isn't true." "I'm sorry, Ethan," I said, and I meant it. I wished it weren't true. Margaret lifted the papers in her wrinkled hands, squinted, then looked at her son. "Is it true, David? You slept with your son's wife?" "Mom, this is complicated. You don't understand." "What don't I understand?" Margaret's voice rose. "Betraying your wife? Betraying your son? Destroying this family?" "No one is destroying anything," Giselle snapped, wiping her tears. Rage flashed. "Everyone acts as if Sylvia were a saint. Do you know why this happened? Because she stopped being a wife years ago. David was alone. He needed someone to listen to him." "Shut up," Ethan growled. "Shut up right now." But Giselle didn't stop. She pointed at me. "She's cold, distant. When was the last time you made your husband feel special, Sylvia? When did you care about anything other than your perfect dinners?" Claire stood. "How dare you? Sylvia has given everything for this family." Giselle sneered. "A clean house and food on the table. That's not a marriage. David deserves more." A heat rose in my throat. For 35 years, I'd been the perfect wife. I quit my teaching job when Ethan was born because David wanted me at home. I gave up friends because he said I spent too much time with them. I stopped painting, my only passion, because he needed the studio for his office. I disappeared piece by piece until nothing remained but the woman who cooked, cleaned, and smiled. "You're right," I said, my voice calm. too calm. I wasn't enough for him. The funny thing is, neither are you, Giselle, because if you were, David wouldn't still be sleeping with me. Giselle paled. David closed his eyes. Every night for 6 months, I continued. Since I discovered the affair, David came home, climbed into my bed, kissed me, told me he loved me, and I let him, knowing exactly where he'd been. Robert let out a bitter laugh. This is betrayal on every level, Margaret said coldly. Susan touched my shoulder. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Why now? Because I needed proof, and I needed all of you to see it with your own eyes. I didn't want to be the hysterical wife making baseless accusations. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. Ethan slumped back into his chair, head in his hands. I can't believe this. Dad, how could you? David moved toward him. Son, listen. I didn't mean it. It just happened. Giselle and I, there's a connection. A connection? Ethan lifted his head, eyes red. She's my wife. And now she's pregnant, with you. What kind of connection justifies that? Love, Giselle said, stepping to David's side. What David and I have is real love, not like what he has with Sylvia, and not like what I had with you, Ethan. None of you would understand. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Love. How convenient. Margaret approached me for the first time in 35 years, looked into my eyes, and asked, Sylvia, what are you going to do? I'm going to get a divorce, I said simply, and I'm going to take what's mine, the house. The accounts, everything we built together. I put up 50% of the money to buy this house, an inheritance from my father. David convinced me to title it jointly, but I have the paperwork. David stepped back. Sylvia, wait, we can talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You have your love. I have my dignity. That's worth more. Claire clapped once. Well said, sister. Giselle cried out. You can't keep everything. David is the father of my child. He has responsibilities. Let him fulfill them, with his own money, I said. Not with mine. Margaret looked at David. Shame on you. Your father must be turning in his grave. Mom, please, David reached for her, but Margaret pulled away. Don't touch me. Not until you fix this mess, if it can be fixed. Silence fell again. The turkey was half eaten, the pumpkin pie untouched. 35 years of perfect Christmases, and this was the one that revealed the truth of my life. I want them gone, I said finally. Everyone, except Ethan. Giselle opened her mouth, but Ethan's look stopped her. Go, he told his wife. I don't want to see you right now. I don't know if I ever will. Giselle tried to move closer, he stepped back. Go with him, with your true love, but get out of my sight. David looked at Giselle, then at Ethan, then at me. He had lost. They all had, except me. One by one, they filed out. Margaret was the last. Before she left, she came over and gave me something she'd never given me in 35 years, a hug. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you. And then she was gone, leaving me with my son in the dining room where my life had exploded, and strangely, where my liberation had begun. Ethan and I sat for what felt like an eternity. Neither of us spoke. We listened to the ticking of the old grandfather clock. How long did you know? He asked finally. 6 months, I answered. He lifted his head, eyes rimmed red. And you never said anything? I needed to be sure. I needed proof. And I searched for words. I didn't know how to tell my son that his father and his wife were betraying him. Ethan ran his hands over his face. The signs were there: late nights, Dad coming home as she was leaving, the way they looked at each other, and I thought they were just getting along. How stupid I was. You weren't stupid, I said. You trusted the people you loved. That doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human. He paced. I'm so angry, Mom. I want to break something. I want to scream. I know, I said gently. Believe me, I know. He stopped by the window, looking into the dark garden. Are you really getting a divorce? Yes. And the house is mine as much as his, more mine, in fact. But I don't want to stay here. Too many memories. I'm going to sell it. Start over. Ethan nodded slowly. And where do I fit into all of this? I put a hand on his arm. You're my son. You always will be. Nothing your father did changes that. Tears filled his eyes. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I can even look at his face. You don't have to decide now. My phone vibrated. A message from David: we need to talk, please. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Is it him? Ethan asked. I nodded. I'm not answering. Ethan turned my phone off. Good. Let him suffer. That night, Ethan slept in his old room. I stayed awake on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Around 3 a.m., I heard a car in the driveway. David. His key didn't work. I'd changed the locks. He knocked. Sylvia, open up. We need to talk. I didn't move. After 10 minutes of pleading, he left. 3 days later, I was in my lawyer's office. Patricia Chen, late 40s and ruthless in divorce cases. The $500 consultation was worth every penny. I have everything I need, she said after reviewing the investigator's photos, the DNA results, and the records showing my contribution to the house. This will be simple. He has no defenses. I want it quick, I said. No dragging this out. What about the baby? She asked. That's his problem, not mine. That afternoon, I returned home to find Giselle on the porch steps. She stood when she saw me. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please, she said, voice cracking. 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room. She's not David's, she blurted. I stilled. What? The baby isn't David's. I felt the ground shift. What are you talking about? I saw the DNA results. I tampered with the samples, she said quickly. I have contacts at another lab. I switched them before your friend processed them. I needed everyone to believe it was David's. Why? Because the real father couldn't know. Anger surged. So this was all a sham? No, the affair with David was real. But the baby. The baby is someone else's. Whose? Giselle closed her eyes. A tear rolled down. Ethan's. The world stopped. What? The baby is Ethan's, she repeated. He's my husband. I was having an affair with David, but I thought if I said the baby was David's, I could somehow salvage my marriage. If I caused a big enough scene, Ethan would never suspect David, and we could start over. That's the most twisted thing I've ever heard, I said. I know, she whispered. I was desperate. And David agreed to play along because he wanted a divorce without a fight, without dividing property. He thought if you believed he got me pregnant, You'd be so devastated you'd just walk away. But they didn't count on me having proof, I said. On me doing my own research. We didn't, she admitted. Get out of my house, I said, opening the door. Before I call the police. Never come back. She left in tears. I watched her drive away. Then I closed the door and finally allowed myself to cry. Even when I thought I'd seen the worst, there was more. There was always more. And now I had a decision: tell Ethan the truth, or let him keep believing a lie that would destroy him. At 7 a.m., I called Patricia. I need you to order another DNA test, a real one, when the baby is born. Why? We already have one with David. It was tampered with, I said. I have reason to believe the real father is Ethan. This is getting more complicated, she said. I know. But I need the truth. That morning, Ethan came down with puffy eyes. He sat while I made coffee. I need to tell you something, I said, setting a cup in front of him. I don't know if I can handle more surprises, Mom. Giselle came yesterday when you weren't here. He tensed. She told me the baby isn't your father's. It's yours. His cup slipped and shattered on the floor. What? I told him everything: Giselle's confession, the plan, the tampered test. Ethan listened in silence, his face moving through a dozen emotions. I don't believe her, he said at last. It's another lie. I thought so too. That's why we'll test the baby when it's born. I paused. And if it's true, if the baby is yours? He stood so abruptly his chair tipped. I don't care. I want nothing to do with that baby, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with either of them. Ethan, no, Mom. I can't be the father of a child conceived while my wife was sleeping with my father. I understood. Some wounds never fully heal. 3 days later, Margaret called. She wanted to see me. We met at a small cafe, far from anyone we knew. I've been thinking about David, and how I raised him, she said, hands shaking slightly. Maybe I overprotected him after his father died. I treated him like a prince who could do no wrong. Margaret, you aren't responsible for his choices. Maybe not. But I owe you an apology, 35 years' worth. I was never kind. I thought you weren't enough for my son. Turns out it was the other way around. Thank you, I said, a lump in my throat. David came to see me yesterday, desperate. He asked me to convince you not to divorce him, to give him another chance. And what did you say? I told him that if you were smart enough to walk away, I wouldn't be the one to stop you. I told him you deserved much more than what he gave you. That afternoon David showed up at the house, knocking insistently. I was alone. Ethan had gone to his apartment to collect a few things. I considered not opening, but something made me. He looked wrecked, wrinkled clothes, several days' beard, bloodshot eyes. The perfect man, the exemplary husband, was in pieces. Sylvia, please, he said as soon as I opened the door. I need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. There is, he insisted. Please, let me explain. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat far apart. It was a mistake, he began. A horrible mistake. Giselle seduced me, manipulated me. Don't insult me with excuses. It's true, he raised his voice. She came over when you weren't home. She sought me out, said things. I felt old and irrelevant. She made me feel young again. And what about me? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. What about 35 years of marriage? Everything I sacrificed for you? For this family? I know, he said. I know and I'm sorry, but we can fix this. Therapy, we aren't fixing anything, I cut in. This ended the day you slept with our son's wife. The baby isn't mine, he blurted. Giselle confessed. It's Ethan's. It was all a lie. I just played along. Why? Because I wanted out, and I didn't know how. I laughed without humor. Giselle already told me. Do you know what's most pathetic? Even knowing the baby wasn't yours, you were willing to destroy your own son, let him believe his father and wife betrayed him in the worst way, so you could divorce without explanation. David covered his face. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought you'd just leave. You never fought me before. Of course you thought that, I said. For 35 years I accepted your decisions, your demands, your mother's criticism, your lack of support. I disappeared piece by piece until nothing remained. That's on me for allowing it. Sylvia, please, I want you to leave, I said. My lawyer will contact you. You'll sign the papers. I'll keep the house, my share of the accounts, everything that's mine, and you'll let me go without a fight. If you fight, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. He rose slowly. Do you hate me? I thought about it. I expected hatred, rage, the desire for revenge. What I felt was worse. No, David. I don't hate you. I just don't feel anything for you anymore, and I think that's worse. He left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. A week later, the signed divorce papers arrived. David hadn't fought. Patricia called to confirm everything was in order. The house is yours, she said. Accounts divided. You get 60% because you proved your initial contribution. It's over, Sylvia. You're free. That night, Ethan came for dinner. We cooked together for the first time in years, simple pasta with tomato sauce. Eating in the kitchen, not the formal dining room, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. What will you do now? Ethan asked. I'll sell the house, I said. Find a small place just for me, and start over. Your father and Giselle are no longer my problem, nor yours if you don't want them to be. Ethan nodded. Giselle called. She asked to meet, to talk about the baby. What did you say? Nothing. I hung up. I didn't press. Some decisions had to be his. 3 months later, the house sold to a young couple with 2 small children. After paying off the rest of the mortgage and dividing with David as agreed, I walked away with $160,000. Not a fortune, but enough to begin again. I moved into a small 1-bedroom in the city with a tiny kitchen and a balcony facing a park. No formal dining room, no extra rooms. Just mine. Perfect. Ethan helped me move. He looked thinner, tired, but clearer somehow. Giselle had the baby, he said as we arranged boxes. A boy. His name is Thomas. I did the DNA test. I paused. And? It's mine. 99.9%. I sat on the newly placed sofa. What are you going to do? I'm going to be his father, he said. But I'm not going back to Giselle. We signed the divorce. We'll share custody. I'll support him and be in his life. But she and I are finished forever. And David? His jaw tightened. I haven't spoken to him. I don't know if I ever can. You don't have to decide now, I said, his own words to me months earlier. We finished in silence. After Ethan left, I stood alone in my new apartment, small, almost empty, but entirely mine. No ghosts. No painful memories. A blank canvas waiting to be filled. The painting workshop started a week later. There were 8 of us, most older than me. The instructor, Amanda, had us introduce ourselves. "I'm Sylvia," I said. "I used to paint. I stopped for the wrong reasons. I'm here to start again." "Never too late," Amanda smiled. She was right. My hands remembered how to hold the brush, mix colors, and bring to life what I saw in my mind. I painted my first piece that week, a woman from behind, facing an open horizon. "There's so much emotion here," Amanda said. "Freedom, pain, hope, all together." "That's how I feel," I admitted. I met Linda, recently widowed at 68, and Robert, 72, who found painting after retirement. Each had a story, a reason to be there. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. 4 months after I moved, Margaret called. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, though she'd sent flowers when I moved. "I'd like to see you, if you're willing," she said. We met at the same cafe. She looked older, more tired. David's betrayal had wounded her too. "David moved to another state," she said after we ordered coffee. "Arizona. He says he needs to start over where no one knows him." "Good for him," I said, without emotion. "Ethan won't speak to him. I barely tolerate him." She paused. "I've been thinking about how I treated you, how I made you feel small in your own marriage." "Margaret, you don't." "I do," she interrupted. "I'm sorry. I admire how you handled all this, with dignity, without revenge, without destroying David, though you had every reason." "I didn't do it for him," I said. "I did it for me. Destroying him would have kept me tied to him. I needed to be free." She took my hand. "You're stronger than any of us thought, especially me." A year after the divorce, my first painting sold at a small local gallery for $800. Amanda called, excited. "This is just the beginning. You have real talent. You could do a show." "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one ever is. That's part of the adventure." Ethan visited often, sometimes with Thomas. The boy had his father's eyes and smile. Each time I saw him, I felt a mix of joy and sadness, but mostly hope, because Ethan was being the father his own never knew how to be. "How's Giselle?" I asked once, not because I cared, but because Ethan needed to talk. "She lives with her parents. Works part-time. We share custody, but we barely speak, just the essentials." "And you?" "Better, slowly. Some days are harder than others, but I'm better." I understood. One Sunday afternoon, a year and a half after that life-changing Christmas, I was painting on my balcony when the phone rang from an unknown number. "Hello, Sylvia. It's David." My hand tightened on the brush. I hadn't heard his voice in more than a year. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to know how you are." "I'm fine." "Anything else?" A long pause. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did." "I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I hope you're happy." I looked at the canvas, a wildflower garden, chaotic but beautiful, full of life. "I am happy," I said, and realized it was true. "Goodbye, David." I hung up and blocked his number. I didn't need his regret, or his forgiveness, or to give mine. What happened was past. 2 years after that Christmas, I had my first solo exhibition, 20 paintings in a small downtown gallery. Amanda insisted until I agreed. I was nervous on opening night, simple blue dress, hair now fully gray in a bun. Ethan arrived with Thomas, now 2 and running everywhere. Margaret came with her cane and a smile. I'm proud of you, she said. So proud. Linda and Robert were there, too, along with new friends I'd made. I sold 12 paintings that night. I didn't become rich, but that wasn't the point. I had recovered something I thought I'd lost forever. I had recovered myself. Later, back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony. The city glittered with possibilities. I thought about the woman I had been, the one who disappeared piece by piece for 35 years. Who sacrificed her dreams, her identity, her voice. She no longer existed. In her place stood someone who paints. Someone who lives in a small apartment she loves. Someone who learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely, and that freedom doesn't come from revenge, but from letting go. My phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. You were incredible tonight, Mom. I love you, I smiled and replied. I love you too. I put the phone away and looked at the stars. I had lost a marriage, a house, and years of my life, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself. And that, finally, was enough.